Hi, everybody. Welcome to Great Books, Big Ideas. I'm Jim. Time for another reading update. I want to update you on a few things. Number one, books I've recently finished in the last 10 days or so. Also, books I'm currently reading and some new pickups. So I found one book from a little free library and then a small haul from a library sale. So I'll get into that at the tail end of it. Let's start with the books I've finished. The first is a ebook on my Kobo e-reader, and this was a book called Penguin Special, the story of Alan Lane, the founder of Penguin Books. I didn't know what to expect from this book. It's essentially just a biography, and it's a very detailed biography, probably more detail on the life of Alan Lane than I needed, but I was interested in this because I'm a fan of Penguin Books, and I recognize what an important role they played in the 20th century in popularizing and making more affordable classic literature and all kinds of writing, because Penguin does much more than Penguin Classics. So this tells that story, and it's what most interested me about it was the the interconnections between different publishing houses and how Alan Lane moved on from the first book publisher he worked for. I think it was called Bodley Head. And then Penguin Books stems out of that, and people were starting to do reprints and issue more affordable paperbacks. But Alan Lane, I think, did it better maybe than anyone else, and he glommed onto that phenomenon and made very affordable, attractive-looking paperbacks, which are still collectible to this day, and this tells that story. Also, like a lot of inter-office politics in there. It was a pretty small staff of people who worked in that publishing house, and it takes you through all the changes going on in the early to mid to late 20th century. World War II figured really prominently, and how they're just running the business and trying to make ends meet, and where do you find paper during a time of war, and how do you keep making these books affordable, and how do you deal with authors and editors and so forth, and big personalities. So this was pretty interesting stuff. He was in some ways a larger than life figure, and in other ways a kind of average man too. The impression I get of Penguin Books, like their identity as a publisher, was number one, to make books affordable. And there was a lot of resistance in the book publishing world to the cheap paperback trend. People wanted to sell their hardcovers or hardbacks, and Alan Lane changed that whole discussion and convinced a lot of hardback publishers that these two could couple together and one could feed the other and so forth. But there's a lot of competition that's discussed in the book. But the other thing about the impression of Penguin Books as a publisher that came across to me is they seem to be pitching themselves as a middle brow type of publisher, or at least that's like the reputation that they got. Their politics were left of center. They had that sort of liberal mindset in general. So a lot of the books they were choosing, the original books that they were choosing to publish, would come out of that sort of realm. But there was a lot of variety too. And down the line, eventually they came out with the Penguin Classics, so you learn a little bit about that history. Although I think my Penguin Classics book is probably even better on that particular imprint of Penguin, but this gives you a wider view. So you find out a lot of details about his family life and his romances and adventures and things of that sort. But I'm not particularly interested in business people. I don't read business people biographies so much. So that aspect was less interesting than just learning about the different sort of connections, the network of publishers, and how then certain names left Penguin and went on to found other paperback publishers that we're all familiar with. And I don't remember all the details, but names like, Bantam Books comes up, and Pocket Books, and then all the other sort of classic reprint publishers that were sort of swimming in the same waters, like the modern libraries and the everyman libraries. So a lot of those details were fun. It was some good history. But I did feel like the biography went on a little long. It was just more detail than I needed about his life. But all in all, I'm glad I read it. And if you're interested in penguins, this might be required reading. All right, so that is Penguin Special, the story of Alan Lane, the founder of Penguin Books. Also, I finished volume 2 in Marcel Proust, In Search of Lost Time, the newer translations published by Penguin Deluxe Classics. So In the Shadow of Young Girls in Flower, translated by James Grieve. And thoroughly enjoyed this read. I'm planning to make a dedicated book review video of this volume, so I won't say much about it right now. I will say as a little bit of a preview that I think I like the C.K. Scott Moncrief translation of this particular volume better than the James Grieve, but I have to put some more thought into it. I also think I prefer the Lydia Davis translation of Swan's Way to the James Grieve translation of this volume, but it's a perfectly decent translation, and it was great to revisit this volume, and it's one of my favorites in the set of Proust books. So more on that hopefully soon to come. The other book, one more book I finished was this one, and it's Shelby Foote, Stars in Their Courses, the Gettysburg Campaign. I misspoke on a previous video, and I thought this was Bruce Catton, but this is actually Shelby Foote. And this is, I think, excerpted just about the Gettysburg Campaign and the U.S. Civil War from much larger work that Shelby Foote wrote. I read this very quickly. I tend to read history, I think, faster than fiction. Depends on the book, but this just takes you through blow by blow, day by day, even like the precursor to the battle and the aftermath of the battle. And I'm a big Civil War buff, especially the Gettysburg campaign. So I still learned some new things about this. Shelby Foote is very remarkable for his appearance and his input that he had in the very famous Ken Burns documentary on PBS called The Civil War. I think that's Ken Burns' best documentary. And Shelby Foote had a huge presence in that. I love listening to him talk. He has this kind of slow Southern drawl and a lot of understanding about both sides in the war and what they went through. So I enjoyed this a lot, and I thought, well, should I keep it? I think I'm going to give it away. I think I'm going to take it either to Little Free Library or the More Than Books used bookshop and donate it. It's in excellent condition, and I want to pass it on. I don't think I would reread it. Maybe I would read Shelby Foote's, I think it's like a 3-volume epic about the Civil War, but I kind of want to read Bruce Catton first, and this was enough to read it once. I think. I also finished Plato's Republic books 1 and 2. That is the next installment of the Great Books Reading Plan Year 1, and I need to now prepare a video. I'm trying to decide whether to do a 2-part video and do book 1 and then book 2, or just lump them both together. I won't talk too much about Plato for this video, but I have not read the whole Republic since probably in my 20s. I was just really enjoying just the writing style, the sort of the back and forth dialogue, the personalities of the characters. They really jumped off the page. I was just really enjoyed it even more than I thought I would. And I don't think I'll read the whole Republic from this point at this time, but eventually I would like to give the whole book a reread. It's one of his most famous, most important works. So that was cool. Now let's get on to some books that I'm actively reading. And that would be this book, The Magic of Findhorn, which was found at the Unionville High School library sale a few weeks back. And this was like, I talked about this in that book call video. Findhorn comes up in the movie My Dinner with Andre. So I started reading this. I'm only 36 pages into it. And basically it's about this journalist from America who hears interesting things about the place called Findhorn in Scotland, which is this New Age community. It's a real place. This is nonfiction. And then he goes to visit it, and it's about him traveling and then kind of going through like the acclimation process. At this point in the book, he's just very new and things are kind of strange. He's trying to get oriented and figure his way. But he seems to be getting intrigued with it. So it starts with a dose of skepticism, but you can tell that this place called Findhorn is going to win him over. And, it's this magical place where they grow, 40-pound cabbages and bloom things in the snow. But it's also placed like next to an air base, I think. And it's just kind of this forlorn peninsula that the local townspeople don't really visit. So these people are kind of outliers. But it's a very 70s book. I love the illustrations. And it's, here's a sample. Every chapter has its own little kind of illustration like that. And I'm going to have a lot of fun reading this. The other book I got recently, and I mentioned in my book haul video that I wanted to start this soon, and I did, and it's John Reed, 10 Days That Shook the World. So I'm just very early on in this. This is the story of the Bolshevist revolution, and from an insider's point of view, John Reed was an American and a sympathizer with communism and socialism. And he was an eyewitness. So it's a real great firsthand account. Just getting started with it, though. I'm getting a lot of the background of the revolution that happened before this revolution. So things were very turbulent in Russia at this point in time. And more on that later. I'm not far enough into it to have much to comment about. So those are my active reads, and I'll share you this next one. Now we'll get into the new pickups. So one of the new pickups I have started reading already. I found this in a little free library that I haven't been by in quite a while because our dog is old now. He just turned 14. He doesn't like to go for long walks anymore. So my daughter got him a stroller. And now, occasionally on nice days, in the afternoon walk, we sort of put him in the stroller and kind of get a few blocks farther than maybe we would normally get. And then we let him out to sniff, and then he walks back home. So it was on one of these walks that I encountered this little free library a couple blocks away. And this jumped out at me right away. First of all, look at how thick this chunker is. Good Lord. And this is called High Minds, The Victorians and the Birth of Modern Britain by Simon Heffer. And this came out, I think, about 12 years ago or so. Let me see. It's published by Windmill Books, 2013 copyright. I don't know who Simon Heffer is, but this looks like a major piece of popular history. And I wasn't sure I would be so interested in the Victorian period, but he's got me interested already. I'm about 60 pages into it already, and this is the story of the 1840s to the 1880s in Britain. It does not focus on foreign policy and colonialism. He says that up front. It's just domestic affairs. But I'll read you the blurb on the back. Simon Heffer's major new book explores the radical transformation of Britain from the 1840s to the 1880s. Evolving from poverty and unrest to progress and prosperity, the nation was revolutionized, not just by industrialization, but by new attitudes to politics, education, women, and the working classes. This change was the work of extraordinary politicians, philanthropists, writers, and thinkers. By analyzing the birth of these new attitudes and looking at how aesthetic issues contributed to broader debates, High Minds traces the development of British democracy. In the process, the author looks at the intellectual arguments and renowned writers and thinkers and the great projects of the age. The result is a nuanced insight into life in an extraordinary era that shows how our forebears' pursuit of perfection gave birth to modern Britain. Okay, we had to reposition the dog on the sofa there, but hopefully he's getting comfortable. So that is, I love serendipity, and I love just kind of randomness, like where something jumps out. This was in very good condition, and I wasn't looking for this book. I wasn't Victorian period. It wasn't on my mind at all. And yet I feel like I'm ready to read this book from front to back. And I'm going to learn a lot about intellectual history and social and political history in England. And it's going to fill in a lot of gaps. So I'll have more to say about this once I get farther into it or complete it. But I'm having a lot of fun so far with that. Then, last but not least, I went on another library sale book jaunt. This was the Newtown Square Public Library, which is back where in my home region where I grew up. It's about 15-20 minutes from here. And this was a much, much smaller sale than the Unionville High School book sale. And I didn't get there right when it opened, but I did come on the first day about an hour or two after the doors had opened. And it already looked like it was somewhat picked through. But after that massive book haul in Unionville, nothing's going to match those expectations at this point. So I've set my expectations low for these other sales I'm going to. And I wasn't sure I was going to find anything, and that's fine. Like, it's hit or miss with library sales, but I did find 6 books. So the first was a City Lights Press book by Allen Ginsberg called Reality Sandwiches by their Pocket Poets series imprint, number 18. And this was first published in the early 60s, 1963. This is the 13th printing, March 1979. This is, I think it's a compilation of different stuff that goes from 1953 to 1960. So this is like 50s era Allen Ginsberg. And I started reading it. It's a lot of good stuff so far. I like his blurb on the back, so I'll just read this for you. It gives you a sense of his style. Wake up nightmares in Lower East Side, musings in public library across the U.S., in Dream Auto, drunk in Old Havana, brooding in Mayan ruins, sex daydreams on the West Coast, airplane vision of Kansas, lonely in a leafy cottage, lunch hour in Berkeley, beery notations on Skid Row, slinking to Mexico, wrote the last night in Paris, back on Times Square, dreaming of Times Square, bombed in New York again, Looney Tunes in the dentist chair, screaming at old poets in South America, ethereal zigzag poesy in blue hotel rooms in Peru, a wind-up book of dream notes, psalms, journal enigmas, and nude minutes from 1953 to 1960, poems scattered in fugitive magazines, here collected now, book. That's typical Beat Generation writing style right there. And yeah, Allen let it all hang out, let's put it that way. And let me read you the first poem from this book. It's I want to get more in the habit of reading some samples from these books I pick up or that I've read, just to give you a sense of whether you might be interested in them or not. This first poem's called My Alba. Now that I've wasted 5 years in Manhattan, life decaying, talent a blank, talking, disconnected, patient and mental, slide rule and number, machine on a desk, autographed triplicate, synopsis, and taxes, obedient prompt, poorly paid, stayed on the market, youth of my 20s, fainted in offices, wept on typewriters, deceived multitudes in vast conspiracies, deodorant battleships, serious business industry. Every 6 weeks, whoever drank my blood, bank innocent evil now, part of my system. 5 years, unhappy labor, 22 to 27, working, not a dime in the bank to show for it anyway. Dawn breaks. It's only the sun. The east smokes. Oh, my bedroom, I am damned to hell. What? Alarm clock is ringing. New York, 1953. So that was a nice find. I love the title, too. Reality Sandwiches. Great stuff. So that's fun. And I'm currently reading that. Then I found 2 Louis L'Amour novels. So Louis L'Amour, I first read one of his westerns just a few weeks ago, and I donated that. That was called Conager. So these were, all these books, by the way, were $1 each. Louis L'Amour, Reilly's Luck. So what's this about? Learn by the gun. Val Darrant was just a child when he began his education at the side of the tall, dark gambler named Will Reilly. From Colorado boomtowns and seedy Texas saloons to the ancient streets of Europe and back, it was a school of cards, poetry, violence, honor, and luck. Then, outside a fancy Colorado hotel, Reilly's luck ran out in a blasting roar of shotguns. Now Val Darrant will have to heed every lesson the gambler taught him, because somewhere between his old life and a new one is the one thing that means everything to Val. Find the ruthless gunman who brought Will Reilly down and make them pay. Sounds like a revenge plot. And let me give you a sample of the first couple paragraphs. See how this master Western storyteller opens up this book. It was dark and cold, the only light coming from the crack under the ill-fitting door. The boy, huddled in the bed, shivered against the cold, listening to the low mutter of voices from the adjoining room. Outside, everything was buried in snow. The window was thick with frost, shutting out what light there might have been. Once he heard boots crunch on the snow as a man walked back from the street. Suddenly, Ma's voice lifted, strident and impatient. I've got no time for the kid. Now you get rid of him. Let one of those farmers have him. They all seem to want kids. Lord knows they have enough of them. And that's the first 3 short paragraphs there. So a little bit of an in media res opening there, some scene setting. We'll see. And then the other Louis L'Amour book I found was called Flint. Here's what Flint is about. He came out of the Malpais, or a Malpais, the terrible volcanic badlands where nothing can live, riding a giant red stallion no other man could put a hand to. His boots were polished, his speech was gentle, but his guns were quick and smooth as silk. He shot first and talked later. No other indication of what the plot's about, but sounds like a tough guy. And let's read the very beginning of this book. Flint. Looks like it was first published in 1960. And we'll read the first half page or so. Chapter 1. It is given to few people in this world to disappear twice. But as he had succeeded once, the man known as James T. Kettleman was about to make his second attempt. If he did not succeed this time, he would never know it, for he would be dead. When a man has but a few months to live, He can, if he so wills, choose the manner of his going, and Kettleman had made such a choice. He was now on his way to a place of which he alone knew, and there he would die. He would die as he had lived, alone. It was ironic that he, who hated the West, should return there to die. But like a wild animal which knows when death is upon it, he was seeking in a dark and lonely place where he could die in peace and in his own way. At this moment, no man in the railroad car looked stronger, more alive, more resolute, yet the seed of death was in him, and the plant had but a little while to grow. So, very different type of opening from Reilly's Luck, but yeah, it gives you a little taste of Louis L'Amour to whet the appetite. I really enjoyed Conager, so these kind of Louis L'Amour books, which I don't need to hang on to, but they're nice, like in between books when you want to read something quick between the longer, more complicated, difficult lifts. That kind of stuff is a lot of fun. Moving along, I found another Beat Generation poet, and this is a New Directions paper book. Lawrence Ferlinghetti, Endless Life, Selected Poems. Lawrence Ferlinghetti, I was originally exposed to in high school. My creative writing teacher, Tom Williams. I know we did something by Lawrence Ferlinghetti because the name stuck with me. And he was also big on Richard Brautigan, so we read a lot of his stuff. But we have a few Lawrence Ferlinghetti books already. This is kind of a compilation of work. So let me read you the back copy here. Lawrence Ferlinghetti is surely, as a reviewer in Booklist phrased it, one of our ageless radicals and true bards. By the way, he lived, I think, to be 100 years old, and he just died not long ago, like 2-3 years ago, I want to say. I forget exactly how old he was, but he crossed the century mark. He has consistently spoken in poetic terms accessible to every type of reader about our life and time and its issues, not only the political ones, but those of the interior life. Behind the immediacy of what Library Journal called his dynamic, verbose, alarming, charming, and unsettling poetry and its irresistible spontaneity lies serious thought and erudition. His motivation has been to be, in his words, an agent provocateur, subversive, anarchistic, and prophetic. Endless Life, Selected Poems is the poet's own choice, the poems that still excite him from the 8 previous books of poetry. These start with Pictures of the Gone World, 1955, the first book he published under his own City Lights imprint. So City Light Bookstore and City Lights Book, the publisher, he started that. That was his baby. And then that's followed by A Coney Island of the Mind, 1958, a literary landmark with almost 1 million copies in print the world over, and the first of Ferlinghetti's 13 books brought out by New Directions. We have that, and probably is his most famous book. Starting from San Francisco, 1961, The Secret Meaning of Things, 1969, Open Eye, Open Heart, 1973, Who Are We Now, 1976, Northwest Ecologue, 1978, and Landscapes of Living and Dying, 1979, are each generously represented. The final section of the book includes the long title poem, Endless Life, taken from Work in Progress. So a nice sampler of his work, selected by the poet himself, published in 1981. And let me see if we can give you a taste of the first poem. This is the little one-pager, won't take long to read. This poem is called Away Above a Harbor Full. Away above a harbor full of caulkless houses, among the Charlie Noble chimney pots of a rooftop rigged with clotheslines, a woman pastes up sails upon the wind, hanging out her mourning sheets with wooden pins. Oh, lovely mammal, her nearly naked breasts throw taut shadows when she stretches up to hang at last, the last of her so whitewashed sins, but it is wetly amorous and winds itself about her, clinging to her skin, so caught with arms upraised, She tosses back her head in voiceless laughter, and in choiceless gesture then shakes out gold hair, while in the reachless seascape spaces between the blown white shrouds stand out the bright steamers to kingdom come. Nice visual poem there, like the imagery. That's Endless Life Selected Poems by Lawrence Ferlinghetti. These are all those library, this small haul I did. This one jumped out at me too. It's called Popul Vuh, the definitive edition of the Mayan Book of the Dawn of Life and the Glories of God and Kings, revised and expanded, translated by Dennis Tedlock. I don't know much about Popul Vuh, but I've heard of it. I came across it in one of my Norton anthologies when I was teaching survey classes. So let me read you about this. Popul Vuh, the Quiché Mayan Book of Creation, is not only the most important text in the native languages of the Americas, it is also an extraordinary document of the human imagination. It begins with the deeds of Mayan gods in the darkness of a primeval sea and ends with the radiant splendor of the Mayan lords who founded the Quiché kingdom in the Guatemalan highlands. Originally written in Mayan hieroglyphs, it was transcribed into the Roman alphabet in the 16th century. This new edition of Dennis Tedlock's unabridged, widely praised translation includes new notes and commentary, newly translated passages, newly deciphered hieroglyphs, and over 40 new illustrations. And this will be fun. I want to always expose myself to new stuff. So there's sort of the Mayan region in Central America and Mexico area, and then here's one of the illustrations, and it looks like the translation is in prose. The last book from the Newtown Square Library book sale was a book by Ingmar Bergman, the Swedish film director, one of my favorite film directors. It's called Images, My Life in Film. And of course, the cover leapt out at me and grabbed me by the lapel, and that is Death from The Seventh Seal, one of Bergman's greatest and most famous films. And let's see what this is about. An acknowledged giant of film, Ingmar Bergman is one of the great creative artists of this century. His career as a movie director, screenwriter, and producer spanned more than 40 years, during which he made such masterpieces as The Seventh Seal, Wild Strawberries, Persona, Cries and Whispers, and Fanny and Alexander. After his retirement from filmmaking in 1986, Bergman wrote an autobiography, The Magic Lantern, which was hailed as surely one of the finest self-portraits of an artist in our time. Now, in Images, he turns the magic lantern of memory from himself to his films. To write this book, Bergman rescreened all of his films, many of which he had not seen since their release. He relied, too, on annotated scripts and the recollections of others, but especially on his own unpublished workbooks and diaries. Images is the creator's effort to account for the sources of his creation. It is at once a penetrating, unsentimental portrait of artistry and a fascinating self-portrait. Bergman recounts the making of his films and explores the themes that bind them together, the preoccupations, the anguish, and the conflicts. He comments brilliantly and unsparingly on his perceived failures as well as his successes. Because his life and films are so intertwined, Images adds much to our knowledge of the man while offering countless insights into the work. An eloquent and indispensable companion to Ingmar Bergman's films, Images contains a complete filmography and more than 200 film stills and photographs from the movie sets. This was a pretty good find. For $1, yeah, I'm into it. This sounds awesome. And we have, let me just try to dip in here. I'll read you the very beginning of it too. There's a still from Wild Strawberries, and it's really heavily illustrated. Yeah, I'm liking the look of this a lot. I like that we get a filmography too. And it would be great to hear him talk about his own work and as it relates to his life. Wonderful, wonderful. Awesome. Okay, so let's look at the beginning of it. In available photos from the time, the four of us are neatly combed and smiling politely at one another. We are deeply involved in a book project to be called Bergman on Bergman. The idea was for three young journalists armed to the teeth with detailed knowledge to question me about my movies. The year was 1968, and I had just finished Shame, which is a phenomenal movie. Everybody should watch that one. As I leaf through that book today, I find it to be hypocritical. Hypocritical? That's right, hypocritical. My young interviewers were the bearers of the only true political conviction. They also knew that I had been left behind by the times, demeaned and scorned by the new aesthetics of the younger generation, and yet I could never claim there was any lack of courtesy or attentiveness on their part. What I did not realize during our sessions was that they were little by little reconstructing a dinosaur, piece by piece, with the kind assistance of the monster himself. In that book, I appear less than candid, always on my guard, and quite fearful. Even questions that are only slightly provocative are given short shrift. I take pains to give answers that might arouse sympathy. I plead for an understanding that in any case is impossible. So I guess this book is going to be a corrective to that. So it'll be fun. It looks very kind of scattered, like little snippets here and there. But this would be fun to read. I don't think this would be hard to get through. So that is Images, My Life in Film, Popul Vuh. What's the beginning of Popul Vuh? I've skipped over this. Let's try this. This is the beginning of the ancient word, here in this place called Quiché. Here we shall inscribe, we shall implant the ancient word, the potential and source for everything done in the citadel of Quiché, in the nation of Quiché people. And here we shall take up the demonstration, revelation, and account of how things were put in shadow and brought to light by the maker, modeler, named bearer, begetter, Hunahpu Pulsum, Hunahpu Coyote, Great White Peccary, Coati, Sovereign Plumed Serpent, Heart of the Lake, Heart of the Sea, Plate Shaper, Bowl Shaper as they are called, also described as the midwife, matchmaker, named Kipyakak, Kane, defender, protector, twice a midwife, twice a matchmaker. As is said in the words of Quiché, they accounted for everything, and did it too, as enlightened beings in enlightened words. We shall write about this now, amid the preaching of God in Christendom now. We shall bring it out, because there is no longer a place to see it. A council book, a place to see the light that came from beside the sea, the account of our place in the shadows, a place to see the dawn of life, as it is called. There is the original book, an ancient writing, but the one who reads and assesses it has a hidden identity. It takes a long performance and account to complete the lighting of all the sky earth. The fourfold siding, fourfold cornering, measuring, fourfold staking, having the cord, stretching the cord in the sky, on the earth, the four sides, the four corners, as it is said, by the maker, modeler, mother, father of life, of humankind, giver of breath, giver of heart, bearer, upbringer in the light that lasts, of those born in the light, begotten in the light, warrior, knower of everything, whatever there is, sky, earth, lake, sea. That's the little prologue to Popul Vuh. So anyway, that's my reading update. A little mixed bag of things. Let me know what you've been reading. If you have thoughts about these books, any comments, questions, please weigh in. I hope you like and subscribe and ring the notification bell so you don't miss upcoming videos. Thanks for joining me. And if you're watching this in real time on Saturday, March 15th, I hope you have a great weekend. Bye-bye.